Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here. Not really. Hey, probably not the best film I've ever made. I'm gonna say that right off the bat. My life over the past month has been absolutely inside out. You've probably noticed I haven't been posting a whole lot, but there's a couple of things I wanna give you an update on and then get to some Q&A. And I've got so many Q&A questions coming in from all over. I wanna say thank you to everybody who sent questions in, and there's some really good ones in here, and then some bizarre ones, because that's the way life is these days. I gave my first in-person talk in 2 years last night, which was pretty fantastic. It was for a small group of graduate art students, photo-specific art students inside the art department. These are graduate students who are really aiming at making a living in both academia and also studio arts. So making prints, making work, selling art, galleries, museums, that kind of thing. So a very different background from my own. I mentioned the phrase or the term PJ at the beginning, and I was met with a lot of like blank stares, and someone was like, what's PJ? And I was like, oh, photojournalism. So very different discipline, very different style of photography, obviously, but it was great to be back out in person. There is nothing for me quite like standing in front of an audience of people, whether it's 10 people or 5,000 people, it doesn't matter. It's fun. I like doing it. My goal as a speaker is not to suck. That's it. Basically, that's it. I've been to so many lectures from photographers that I loved who were that were just terrible lectures. Terrible talks, horrible speakers, unprepared, and it was such a turnoff. When I started my career at Blurb, and 2 weeks into my career, they were like, hey, have you done any public speaking? And I said yes, and I gave a talk for them. I was like, my goal, number one, only goal, don't suck. And if you get people to laugh, even better. So that was fun to be back out in the field. We all wore masks, not a big deal. I have no problem wearing a mask. I think those of us out there who are complaining and whining and making an issue of wearing a mask just proves how spoiled and entitled we are as a nation. And I'm just leaving it at our nation. I'm not talking about the rest of the world. I could go on. I could easily turn this film into my podcast where I talk about things like Russia and Ukraine and politics and everything else, but I won't. I will hold off. What other updates? Shifter.media is in the process of being updated, and it's going well. And it's not a huge reinvention of the site. It's a simplification and a refresh. Putting lipstick on a pig, in other words. No, Fleming and Charlene have been great, working quickly, not doing any major changes, adding a couple of things, subtracting a couple of things, but it should be ready to launch in the next couple of weeks. It's great. My Patreon page is going to be live, believe it or not. It's kind of embarrassing, but it is. And now I'm trying to figure out what, if I receive any Patreon funds, what the hell am I going to do with that money, and how can I use it in a way that's atypical and also very interesting for you? So that's what I'm working on. The newsletter will be coming, I swear to God. I know I've been saying that for 10 years. I literally will be sending a newsletter and really focusing on building up that subscription list. And again, look, people, I need to say this from outer space. I have no dog in this hunt. I really don't. I'm doing this as an example to show other people how to build a community without Instagram and Facebook. And by the way, every single day I hear people come up to me in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes in person, sometimes through email. Hey man, I'm with you. I don't want this. I don't want to be Facebook, Instagram anymore. And so it's pretty interesting. That's why I'm doing this whole site. But it's also fun, and I'm learning, and I like the idea of moving some pieces around on the board. Okay, last update before I get to the Q&A. I did a recording last week that I thought was really good. Really good. And it was in the Books I Love series. And it was about this book right here, called The Perfect Imperfect, which is John Dolan's book on wedding photography. Or is it? Cue Dr. Evil. Or is it? So the film was about the idea of perception and how John Dolan is a wedding photographer, and he did a book about wedding photography called The Perfect Imperfect, but it isn't really a book about wedding photography. The foreword was written by Martha Stewart, which was a super smart move. There's also an essay by Sylvia Plath, and if you don't know who she is, today's your lucky day. Look her up. And the book design was done by Yolanda Cuomo, who's one of my favorite designers. I did a long film about the book itself. I did the top-down view. I did all that, and I talked about Yolanda, and I talked about how smart it is to have someone like Martha Stewart write the foreword and someone like Sylvia Plath, which to me, when I saw this book, and I thought, wow, that's odd. A publisher published a book about wedding photography. Why? And all of a sudden I dove into it and I was like, and John made me, and I'm gonna get to this in a minute because one of my Q&A questions is about wedding photography. I was a wedding photographer. So this really sparked my interest as Damiani is the publisher and how and why did this happen? And so the book made me alter my perception of what I thought I knew. That is the power of this book. So it might sound weird that I would be recommending a book about wedding photography, but it's about perception. And perception is so important in photography, even when the perception is flawed and not real. And so I did this really good film. And I didn't reach out to John to ask him if I could do it. And so I started I was just about to start a second film in the Books I Love series, which is about the Gilles Perez Steidl book called Whatever You Say Nothing. This is about his work in Northern Ireland. And by the way, this book comes with a publishing insert that is the most mind-blowing thing I have seen. And I cannot believe more people do not do this. I'm sure it's a cost issue. But let me just give you a little background. This is what is in this little supplement, which is The Book is an Object by Gilles Perez, Densitometric Alchemy by Steidl, Whatever You Say Nothing, the whole package, Annals of the North, History of a Book, From Book to Wall, Book Dummies, a conversation between Gilles and Steidl, and a Q&A. This is terrifying to me because it's so good and it's so insightful about not only the photographic process, but the publishing process and the teamwork that happens behind the scenes for something like that to go into space. I had been sitting on the Steidl book for quite some time, a little bit nervous about doing it justice, right? That's always a fear of mine when I'm focusing or highlighting on anyone else's work besides my own. My own, I don't care, whatever. You hate it, I move on. But someone else's work who put that much work in, I've got to do it justice. So I'm just about to start filming that. I reach out to someone else whose book I just got, a book I really like, that I haven't quite read yet. And it's a book with a photo book with a lot of copy. It's about history. And I reached out and I said, look, I'd love to do a film about the book. And they said, yeah, no problem. Oh, by the way, be careful about this, and this, because these people are featured and they may not take a liking to the film. Or, you know, in essence, what their person is saying is, you could be infringing on these people. You could infringe their copyright. They may not like this. They didn't give you permission. And I am not about to go out and start to get permission from folks to try to do a YouTube film to promote their book. I just don't want to do that. And it really, I don't know. It was something I've been thinking about for a long time. Anytime, I do not want to feature other people's work. I don't want to show a single image from someone else because I don't have rights to it. I don't have permission. And we live in the most litigious society in the world. People sue each other for sport all the time. I know photographers that have teams of lawyers who are constantly scouring for infringement cases. And I have a sinking suspicion they're making more money from lawsuits today than they are from actual photography. One of the reasons I quit photography in 2010 was a 2-year lawsuit where I did not do anything, anything wrong. And I spent 2 years dealing with this lawsuit. It went to the state Supreme Court in the state where I was actually at the time. Long story, can't talk about the case, don't want to talk about the case. It was stressful, horrible, awful. And oh, by the way, for those of you out there who think a model release is going to have any impact whatsoever of you getting sued or going to trial, you are delusional. It has no impact whatsoever. And so it was a long and sticky thing. It was one of the big turnoffs for me to continue to be working as a photographer. It just sucked the fun out of it. The last commercial shoot I did, when I left the shoot itself, I had 7 releases. That included model releases, location releases, architectural releases. I had 7 and I was nervous that I did not have enough. One of the people I was photographing was from divorced parents. I only had a release from one of the parents. I didn't have the second one who was out of state, and that was a problem. It was making me nervous, and I was like, this isn't fun anymore. I don't want to do it. So hence, now I'm here. Now I'm a YouTube darling, and now I have no concerns. No, the point is, I'm not doing Books I Love anymore, unless it's a book of my own, and then that would just be a total a-hole move because you know me. I'm not blowing my own horn photographically. I was at one point an okay photographer. I would not put myself in that category now. And if you've seen any of the work I've produced lately, you'd probably be in agreement. So I think that's the total update. I just did a run. That's not very exciting. Gave a talk, no more Books I Love. What else? I got a new bag. That's not interesting. I took some vitamins a minute ago. Okay, let's get on to the Q&A. Damn it, Milner, stay on target. Luke, you switched off your targeting computer. Shut up. I'm trying to kill a swamp rat. So these are completely out of order. I did this to myself. I screwed this up. I've got some handwritten, some typed. You know me. Question number 1 is actually number 12 on my list, which is, why do I bag on wedding photographers? That is a great question and totally fair. And by the way, I've joined the circle of life. Not really. That's a lens holder, a glasses holder. My wife makes them. And I thought I would just, you know, wear it today for whatever reason. I'm not wearing a jacket, as you can see. The film I did last week where I recorded about perception, I had 3 coats on just to rub those people who always wonder why I'm wearing a jacket, just to rub you the wrong way. It's kind of person I am. Why do I bag on wedding photographers? I bag on wedding photographers because I was a wedding photographer. And in my book, that's all it takes. Now, that is an unfair bagging because wedding photography is filled with some really, really good photographers. They will never get credit in the commercial side of photography, but they are very good. Not everyone, and yes, the wedding industry has some people that are not good, maybe in a blue ruffle tux that are hitting on the bridesmaids. That's gonna happen, right? That guy is out there. And frankly, I love that guy because he's really fun to watch, but I was not that guy. But I can bag on wedding photographers because I was a wedding photographer. Here's the backstory. This is interesting and also deals with perception. So I studied photojournalism, as I mentioned before. Photojournalism and wedding photography are on the opposite sides of the spectrum. So when I came out of school, if you were a photographer in my circles, right? Think wearing all black with scarves, smoking, those circles. If you said, I'm a wedding photographer, people were like, you're a loser. You're a total loser. You must suck so bad you can't do anything else. Perception. That was flawed. That was an incorrect perception. That was not my perception, but I was not a lover of wedding photography, nor did I ever consider wedding photography. Then I took a workshop in 1997-ish, 98, 99, somewhere around there, here in Santa Fe. Documentary workshop. And in the class was another photographer who had been in the fashion world. And she had starting out with a documentary portfolio. She had not had training in documentary photography, but that was what she wanted to do, and she was trying to learn. And she came to me in the class and said, do you realize how much money you could be making as a wedding photographer with the portfolio you have right now? And I said, you're out of your mind. That's impossible. Why would anyone hire me to do a wedding, especially if I'm shooting a Leica M6 and a 35mm lens and a bag of Tri-X? No one's going to hire me to do that. She said, yes, they will, and they will pay you more than you can imagine. Long story short, she helped me leave my job at Kodak Professional and go back to professional photography, and I became a wedding photographer. This was pre-wedding bubble. This was pre-weddings exploding and the industry developing at a level that was just terrifying and attracting all the sort of hipstery digital folks who were master marketers and not great photographers, but great marketing. It was a very interesting time. I jump in sort of under the radar. Worked as a wedding photography for maybe 6 years or so. The goal was to shoot 10 jobs a year total and then take the revenue from those jobs and go do my long-term documentary projects, which is exactly what I did. But when I left Kodak and went back to photography and actually started and became a wedding photographer, it rubbed some people the wrong way. It rubbed a lot of people in my industry the wrong way. In fact, one person actually wrote an article about me using a different name, talking about me making this transition and using a fake name, but everybody knew who he was writing about, me. And so I started getting calls and emails from people using this fake name, and I was like, what's going on? And one of my friends said, you didn't read the article? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So it rubbed people the wrong way. And there was this stigma of being a wedding photographer that you weren't serious. I got a call from a photographer I know who's a very successful commercial editorial guy, and he said, look, I'm up for a job in Mexico. I can't do it. You're perfect for it. But if the client gets a hint that you shoot weddings, it's done. They will completely disqualify you and say there's no way we're working with a wedding photographer. So I had to create 2 separate websites. I had a wedding website and I had a reportage website, and I had to keep them separate, and I had to keep those clients separate. That is silly and ridiculous and stupid and fickle and idiotic, but that is the way the industry operates. The last thing I'll say is I was in New York at a big photo event, and I was with an agent friend of mine, and we were in a circle of like A-listers, photo A-listers from the New York area, and then me. I was like the schlub, the bottom. I was the dreg on the side, like who invited this loser? And we're all standing in a circle, and we're making introductions, and I could have gone one of two ways here. And because I'm such a perverted, weird, strange man, I was like, I want to see what happens. I'm gonna blow this crowd up. Come intro comes to me. I go, oh, I'm a wedding photographer. It was like I said, I got a little plague, I think. And everyone just scattered and ran. And the agent looked at me and said, why did you do that? Why did you tell him you were a wedding photographer? You should have told him you were a doc photographer. I was like, because I wanted to see how fickle and idiotic this whole thing is. And that, to me, rubbed me the wrong way, which is like, look, if your ego's too bad, you think I'm a wedding photographer, that means I can't shoot. You're a clueless moron. I meant that in the most polite way, clueless moron. But that stigma exists, that perception exists, and it's wrong. Because Dolan is a great example. Joe Busink in LA is a great example. The woman who got me out of Kodak and into wedding photography is a great example. These are really good photographers that you could put anywhere in any situation, and they're going to make pictures. And oh, by the way, most of the time, they're far better organized. They're far better business people, and they're making far more money than the commercial side. And remember, professional photography, at least from the Kodak perspective, was broken into two divisions. Kodak Professional Commercial, which is where I worked, fashion, advertising, commercial, editorial, automotive, that kind of thing. And then portrait wedding. And portrait wedding, I was working in the commercial circles, and occasionally I would attend an event where there was a little bit of crossover. And I'd go to an event where there were wedding photographers. And I was always like, man, these people are organized. They're really good business people. They know how to market far better than the commercial side. And they're making a lot more money. And that's what really started to like go, man, I had to like rethink my decision-making paradigm here about like what these people are and what do they do. And so I was very impressed. That stigma was still there. And the commercial side was often filled with far more ego, with insecurity, with hypocrisy, all kinds of stuff. But there were also the commercial side was making some of the most definitive signature work that was happening in photography, and that's still true today. Whether it's editorial folks or reportage or commercial or fashion or advertising, those folks are making some of the stuff that is like legendarily seared into our subculture, in our basically the fabric of our society. That's not necessarily happening as much in the portrait wedding side. And when I say portrait, I don't mean like celebrity portraits. I mean like private commission portraiture, which is what I did as well for 7 years. So anyway, that's why I bag on wedding photographers. And I'm only sort of half and half bagging on wedding photographers. It's the oat milk. So it's the oat milk of bagging. It's not really milk, but it kind of looks like milk, and it kind of smells like milk and kind of tastes like milk, but it's not really milk. That's my bagging on wedding photographers. I do it out of a place of love, kind of. Jesus, get it together. Oh yeah. There's nothing better on a hot day than a glass of Hawaiian punch. It just quenches the thirst like nothing else. Question number 2. I don't know. I can't read my own writing. I think it says, was IG destined? I have no idea what that means. Whoever sent me that question, it's my fault. I don't know. Was it destined for me leaving Instagram? Was it destined for Instagram to fail? Yes, on both of those. Everything in the digital culture, for the most part, except maybe the JPEG, maybe the TIFF file, everything fails. Like, it's just a constant recycle, change cycle that's happening all the time. I remember where I was literally on the street in San Francisco when I signed up for Instagram, and I used it. I remember exactly where I was the day I deleted it. I was in Pie Town, New Mexico, standing in the middle of the highway, and I was like, what am I doing? You know, I'd been shooting on a project, and I had 2 Leicas with me, and I had my phone, and I'd been on Instagram all morning. And I was like, what the hell am I doing? I haven't made any real pictures. I've just been doing this stupid stuff. And so I literally deleted Instagram on the spot. I've never gone back to it, I don't think. No, someone created an account in my name, and I did that for like 3 weeks, and I was like, no, I can't do this anymore. So yes, I was destined to leave that. I think Instagram is destined to fail. Something will replace it, obviously. Gotta quit smoking. What I do is I smoke Marlboro Reds, and then I go for a run, just to make it more difficult because I'm such a great runner. So that's the question. That was question number 2. I think, was IG destined? I don't know. I butchered this question. Jesus Cristo, I just can't get it right. So yes, I think it's destined to fail. All I can tell you is the intense feeling of relief that I had after 2 weeks of being off of Instagram and realizing what a mind suck that thing is. Again, the perfect weapon. The people who built that platform are very intelligent people. They knew exactly how that program would exploit human vulnerability, and it has, and it did, and it will continue as long as people are on it. And look, a lot of people are still 100% full steam ahead, gung-ho, selling out, selling themselves on that platform all day, every day. It's merciless and ridiculous, and man, I just don't want to be around it. But I have to say, for the first time ever, I am seeing masses, and I'm talking masses of people getting away from that Facebook and IG, getting away from basically the Zuckerberg empire and saying, I don't want anything to do with that guy. And I'm seeing it from all directions. I'm seeing it from brands. I'm seeing it from agencies. I'm seeing it from individuals. I'm seeing it from institutions of just saying, we don't want to put up with this anymore. We don't want this. And then looking at the new meta that's coming, and people are like, no way am I going to be involved in that. Now, I'm sure there's a generation coming up that may, but the crazy part for me is the generation that I have, like nieces and nephews, they don't like Facebook either. They're like, Facebook's for old people. And they're not on Instagram either. They're on TikTok, which I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to go on. And again, I've seen TikTok ruin some talented people. I mean, really talented people who could be doing anything, and they're doing TikTok, and I can't witness it. It's just like a torture scene where I'm like, no, 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 I don't want to know that's happening. Find a happy place, find a happy place. Dumb and Dumber, the bathroom scene where the guy kicks open the door and Jim Carrey's huddled in a ball sucking his thumb saying, find a happy place. That makes me happy. That's a great scene. And if you're one of those people that's like, oh, I don't like that kind of comedy. I don't like to, just leave this channel. Like don't take yourself so seriously. It's Jim Carrey. He's a national treasure. Always has been. Question number 3. Friends and family photos. That's all I wrote. I didn't even write the question. And I think this is, if I remember correctly, someone was asking about what do you do with your friends and family if they don't want to be photographed? And the key here is communication and dialogue. And that's the key always when you're doing people-based reportage, documentary, portraits, anything. It's about communication. I mean, and oftentimes when you're doing a shoot, a commercial shoot or portrait shoot of people, you might spend 80% of your time talking to get people and say, this is what I'm doing, this is why, this is what I'm after. I found photographing women, for me, was easier than photographing men. And women seem to be far more okay with their self-image. They knew how they looked good, how they felt they looked good, in which direction, and all that kind of thing. Men were always kind of like tense, fronted up, not all, but some. And what I realized was that was where the psychology came in of having to navigate these people. And I would just say to people, especially to men, especially men of power or influence were even harder to work with, is you say to them, look, what we are about to do is completely unnatural. I do not know you at all. We just met when I walked in this room. And now I'm about to ask you to act natural as I point this like bazooka at you from very, very close up. There is nothing natural. But every day when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you see someone that I don't. And you know the strong points of that person and the weak points, and you know how that person feels. And that's what I need you to tap into right now. I need you to act. I need you to act like the person that you see in the mirror in the morning. And this is only going to take a matter of seconds, and I don't need this to be a long, 3-hour movie. This is not a Terrence Malick film. I just need a soundbite of you acting and performing. And men often responded to that really well, like, I get it. This isn't natural. This is going to be a fabricated moment here to get this portrait. Now, I've heard stories about people like Avedon working and making portraits, and Avedon was famous for like really raking his subjects, making those subjects really feel something. And in some cases that might have been good energy, and in some cases that might have been bad, but he was looking for something in them. I was doing the same thing to a far lesser degree, but I was prompting, poking, prodding to get a response in a short amount of time. Family is the ultimate training ground. Because they're your family, it doesn't matter. You don't have to apologize. They're your family, you can do anything you want. My sister, if the camera's in my hand and the camera comes up to eye level in any way, shape, or form, she is hyper alert, and instant like posing kind of thing, which I don't like. My wife is exactly the same way. It's very hard to get natural photos. My mom, my nieces, my nephews are awesome. I can do anything, poke them, prod them, get them to do anything. Even they're getting older now, they would still put up with Uncle Dan looking for this. Again, it's a free fire zone. It's a practice zone that no one else in the world is going to be able to provide you quite like your family. But I also think family documentation is one of the most important things you can do as a photographer. Check your ego, right? If you're one of these people that thinks that you're super cool and that everything you do is wildly important, number one, you're not and it's not. But two, you only got one family, right? And so you're documenting that family for historical purposes, even societal purposes. To me, that is a really important thing to do. My mother was the documentarian in our family until she wasn't. And she literally came to me one day like a relay race and handed me the baton and said, it's on you now. I'm done. Took her Pentax K1000, put it in her Halliburton case with a couple rolls of Kodachrome and was like, slam, lock, toss it like Robert De Niro in Midnight Run. Just threw that thing out there and I'm done. And she's never touched a camera since. Oddly enough, I have. Talk to your family. Explain what it is you're after and why it's important to you. Now, if you're like my family, they will do the polar opposite of what you ask for as long as humanly possible just to make your life miserable. Then they will crack. And I will wear them down and break them down. And I have to say, looking back at pictures of like my nieces and nephews that I made with my Hasselblad and Tri-X, got a picture of my niece. She's missing all her front teeth and her shoes are on the wrong feet. She's laughing maniacally. I love those pictures. It's worth all the grief that it takes to get those. And some of this family stuff that I see really good photographers doing, it's just great photography. It shouldn't be classified as great family photography. It's just great photography. Man, documenting the family is such an important thing. Question number 4, what makes a great photo essay? That is a great question. And I tell you what, I think working in narrative form and doing photo essays is one of the most important topics in photography right now. And I think it's most important for consumers and prosumers who are potentially used to shooting in single form, just random imagery. And all of a sudden you're like, man, why don't you work on a theme? Why don't you like see how those images play together? What about editing those into something together? That's a really important skill to have. It is a skill. This is not like turn on the tap and you suddenly have water. You got to work at it. And you can have it, you can lose it. I lost it. I don't know if I have it in me anymore to shoot narrative stuff. Even if you like stripped away all my job responsibilities and actually gave me the time and I had access, I think I could do it. But it would take me a while. And so a great photo essay is about story and it's about signature. Great story. Story, write this down in all caps and then have it tattooed on your forehead. Just do this. Trust me, the tattoo, I know it's going to shock your family for a while, but they'll get used to it. They're family. Story is king. Story is king. Story is more important, maybe, than the work itself. That's what people are interested in. Tell me a story. What's that film I was thinking? 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. And he's like, tell me a story. And he goes, F you. And he said, oh, that's my favorite one. Story is king. So that's what makes a good photo essay. And 2 is signature. And when I say signature, that is me being able to look at the work and identify who made it. That is an amazing thing. That is truly amazing. If I walk in a gallery and I don't know who the gallery's showing and I walk in and I look at the work on the wall and I go, I know who did that. That is signature. That is incredibly difficult to do. And it's incredibly important and one of the only things of value you will ever have in photography. This guy, sorry for the reflection. Yeah, he's got a signature. Look at his book on Bosnia, look at his book on Rwanda, look at the book on Ireland. He's like Mount Rushmore for me. He's one of the faces on Mount Rushmore. Now he's a European, which means he ain't getting on Mount Rushmore. But if Europe had one, their own, maybe they do have a Mount Rushmore. My guess is it's very small in comparison, but also much more fit, might wear a scarf, might smoke. I don't know. Very European. But anyway, he's got a signature style. A lot of these books on my shelf over here, signature style. A name came up last night, Joel Peter Witkin, who's here in New Mexico. Talk about definitive style. When you walk into a gallery and there's a Witkin, there is no doubt about who made that photograph. Zero doubt. That's called signature. Add a great story, and now you got a great photo essay. Question number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How have your gear needs changed from the time you began your career to today? Oh my God, that is a really good question. Yeah, I don't talk a lot about gear because I find it relatively boring, although I'm filming on this Sony A7C, which is a great camera. And this trip to Baja made me doubt my equipment once again. I was the only person around that had Fuji equipment. I do love the Fuji equipment. I think for the price and ergonomically, it's the best stuff out there. But it's not full frame, and there are things about the Sony A7 and the full frame that I really love. Also, the resolution of the Fuji is only 24 megapixels, and when I was doing some of the things I'm doing now, that resolution is really not enough for what I need. It's the first time I'm running into places where I'm needing to crop a little bit, and when I'm standing next to someone, a friend of mine who's got this full frame, like 50 megapixel Canon, and I'm looking at the work that we shot side by side, and I'm looking at that resolution, and I'm like, wow, that is a glaring difference. So I don't know. I may have to invest in another Sony body and a longer lens, especially with some of the birding stuff I'm doing now, which sounds absurd. I get it. It sounds absurd. Bird nerd. I'm old. My wife's like, you're officially middle-aged, retired schlub now because you're birding. I get that. But I grew up hunting birds, hunting, shotguns. So, you know, dove, quail, chucker, grouse, ducks, geese. I hunted everything. I was like Clint Eastwood in that African movie, the Great White Hunter. Yeah, I grew up hunting birds. So I was birding 2 or 3 days ago in Bosque del Apache, and my wife's like, man, I can tell how much you really like this. And I go, I've been hunting birds my whole life. I'm just not shooting them now. I'm photographing them. So, and I love it. New Mexico has like 500 and some species of birds. I just hit 51 for the year. So that's intriguing to me. But I don't have the right equipment. I'm under-lensed on the Fuji. And so I'm thinking to myself, man, maybe I get a full-frame Sony and get a long lens, the 100 to 400, whatever they make, something like that. I don't know. I started with Nikon. Pretty much everyone I know in my genre, my field, started with Nikon. Nikon owned like 90% of the market back then. And so I had Nikon cameras because that's what the photojournalism instructors put in my hands. I didn't know anything about camera equipment at the time. They just put the cameras in my hands and started using them. I'm like, all right, I'll figure this out. I eventually switched to Canon because Canon came out with autofocus in the late 80s and Nikon was like, it's a fad. And well, it turns out it wasn't a fad. And so within 2 years, Canon had 80% market share. EOS 1, EOS 1V, 20 to 35, 70 to 200. I was a newspaper photographer. I was a journalist. Those lenses and zooms were the first like really good, sharp 2.8 zooms. Everybody had them. Everybody switched over except a couple of diehard stalwarts that stayed with Nikon. My friend Stuart, I know you're going to watch this. Isaac's been a Nikon guy since birth. He literally came out and they were like, oh, look, he has a birthmark. And it wasn't. It was a Nikon logo imprinted in him. So there were a few a few holdouts that were with Nikon. I switched to Canon. But the second I put a Leica rangefinder in my hand, I was like, this is the camera that I was built for. That was built for me. I was built for it. That was my primary system for doing my work for 25 years. I still have my film Leica cameras. I never use them because film doesn't fit logistically for me now. I also picked up Hasselblad 20 years ago, and I love Hasselblad. I love the 6x6. I've shot Voigtlander, Holga, Olympus, Polaroid, Deerdorf, all this kind of stuff. My gear needs have changed now because I have so many other hats to wear as a photographer now. And I'm not a photographer. I don't work as a photographer, and I'm very happy about that. But I have to make a variety of different kinds of work that if left to my own devices, I would never be working. I would never be making this stuff. And so I'm making it for Blurb and for other folks. And so that requires a different set of gear. I would love like an X Pro 3 and the 33 1.4, the newest Fuji lens, which is like their 50 equivalent 1.4, and an X Pro 3, because that camera reminds me the most in the Fuji lineup. It reminds me the most of the Leica systems. It's not quite the same. It's not full frame. I would never buy a Leica because they're too expensive. And they're also a little bit limited for me in terms of how I work now. So I'm older. My eyes don't work as well as they used to. And so manual focus is a little bit slow for me. I do like having the option of auto focus or manual. And so sometimes I dream about just having that one camera and one lens and just saying, screw it. But now I'm into birding and stuff like that. So my gear needs now, I'm now back to needing a system camera. And a system camera to me is like the Fuji X-T4. You can build a system around that. The X Pro 3 probably a little bit more limited. That's not really a camera that, you know, you're gonna slap a super long lens on. Maybe shoot video. Video is now really important. I'm probably doing 90% video and 10% stills. The Sony camera is obviously a major professional system camera. A7 IV, there's a A1, I think now. The problem with Sony is I'm so confused. If you said to me, hey, you can get whatever you want. What do you want? I don't know. There's every time I think I know, like I thought A7 III was like obsolete and outdated, and people are like, no, just get an A7 III. Wait, isn't there a 4? Yeah, but don't get the 4 because you're gonna do this and you should get the A1. And I'm like, well, what's the A1? And then there's another one on top of that that's even more confusing. I have no idea what's happening. I just need someone to fairy dust to come down and just go bing, bing, bing and tell me what to get. But that's a camera that I can build a system around. And when I look at the future of what photography might be for me, that might come into play. So I don't know, I'm still on the fence. What do I do? Do I wait and see what Fuji has coming next? Or do I just bail and go to Sony or Canon or Nikon or something like that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Are you ever in the UK working? I would be interested in attending a seminar or workshop, etc. if you were. Yes, prior to COVID, I was in the UK probably twice a year on average, sometimes more. And normally when I was in the UK, I was doing seminars and talking and teaching and doing workshops and festivals and events and that kind of thing. And who knows, if COVID actually allows us to do this at some point, I will be back. The UK is a great market for Blurb. I love doing events there. And I will be teaching. I'm also teaching in Albania in May. I'm teaching 2 classes. A class in the southern half of the country and a week off, and then a class in the northern half. And then, yeah, so I'll be back in Europe whenever I can. Question number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is it possible as a nobody with minimal connections to go and document a conflict in this day and age? Wow, that's a great question. First of all, I'm not the person to ask because I don't do conflict photography, but I have friends who do. And my question is possibly, but it's going to be very hard, very expensive, and very dangerous. And also, you've got to think about things. I thought about this earlier because I've said some probably less than flattering things about Vladimir Putin over the years on my podcast. I think Putin is blowing a major opportunity right now to morph Russia into something new and interesting and different and pioneering that no one else in the world has. And he's in fact gone in the polar opposite direction. He is looking at the archaic Cold War Soviet Union and trying to rebuild the pieces, looking at Ukraine as this crown jewel that he's trying to get back. I think he has a really hard time telling the truth. I think he lives, he's a dictator. He can do whatever he wants and says whatever he wants, and he silences anyone that's in opposition. And so having said what I just said, I could probably not go to Russia and cover a war there. And I think a lot of that is true too. A war photographer friend was saying he was trying to cross into Syria, and he got to a very remote sort of checkpoint in the middle of nowhere. And the first question they asked him was, what's your Instagram handle? And they started these like 2 guys with rifles started scouring his Instagram feed, looking for something that would be a clue as to what side he was on. And I was like, man, like what would have happened if they had found something bad that you had said about the regime? Like that's not a good scenario to be in. I did not think about that. I didn't think about the digital dust and the trail, the residue of having an online presence and then saying, look, I'm going to go do these kind of things. I mean, zillions of people have said bad things about Putin, and what he just did yesterday, it's going to get a lot exponentially worse for him, but he doesn't care. Like, this is a guy that's in supreme command of his country and can do and say whatever he wants. Getting in also too, I think expense. I think the days of just hopping on a plane and going to the front lines, I guess it's probably still possible, but man, if you don't have a safety net, like what happens when you get captured? What happens when someone is trying to ransom you? What happens? I mean, I would not want to be there. I mean, when I came up, there were still a lot of people jumping on planes that had no health insurance, nothing. They would just go and show up on the front lines. I think that's less and less common now. But I also think there's fewer outlets for that kind of work. I think the world is just fatigued by that, combat fatigue. And the other thing too is that you have to be, and I'll give you an example. I think Tim Hetherington was an interesting guy, because Tim understood politics and the theater in which he was operating. So he wasn't just someone who pressed the button. He was a guy that could have a deeper dialogue about what was happening in those regions, where I think there are other photographers who are showing up in those places who don't have any concept. They don't speak the language. They don't know the culture. They don't know their history. They don't know the geopolitics. They don't know the theater. They're action junkies. Or they think it looks cool, or it's macho, or they're going to go to a party in LA afterwards and tell people about what they were doing. And I say that because I've been to that party and I've met that guy who was bragging about doing this stuff and had no concept of where he was and what he'd been doing. None, zero. He came across to me as a complete moron, but he did have the stones to go over and cover combat. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would do something closer to home, and I would do something that you have an emotional connection to. that is easy to access. Build your work that way. Then if at some point down the line through good connections with a plan B, and you can get into those scenes and do that, I would do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I don't have a blog or online presence at all. I print for myself only. Do you honestly, you know what? We're gonna stop it right there. We're gonna start over. That's 40 minutes. That's plenty, and I've got a whole second Q&A that I can do. And I'm sorry for the confusion and all that, everything else, but hey, I had coffee today. Someone sent me coffee, and I tried it, and it's good, and it's coursing through my veins, and I think my pulse, let me check my pulse rate. Yep, about 170 right now. So it's coming down from where it was. Appreciate you being here. I am one person with one opinion. Take it for what it is, nothing more, nothing less. I hope wherever you are in this world, you are doing okay with COVID, you are doing okay with your work and your family, and you are somehow able to access that creative part of your brain that allows you to go out and sort of do the things and think about the things that make you, you. That's really the key. Reach out to a neighbor that you haven't seen in a while and ask them how they're doing. What do they need that they don't have, and maybe you can help them out. If we all do that, I think this rock is going to be a little bit more hospitable than it is right now. And we need to get our common sense back and right the ship. So I will be back.